I discovered my ex-wife faked a 7-month pregnancy, but the real father walked into court at last. My ex-wife arrived at the courthouse with a 7-month baby bump and a triumphant smile. She believed that would get her alimony, the house, and even my car. But when the judge asked her how many months along she was, everything fell apart. I never thought I would see my ex-wife pregnant in a courthouse, much less that her 7-month belly would be the weapon she'd use to try to destroy me financially. I was sitting in that cold room with beige walls, waiting for what should have been a routine hearing to finalize our divorce. 8 months after we separated, we were finally going to close this chapter. Or so I thought. The door opened and there she was, Carolina, but not the Carolina I had known for 8 years of marriage. This version came with a prominent belly, a tight black dress that highlighted it perfectly, and a smile that chilled my blood. That smile said, "I have an ace up my sleeve and you're going to pay for everything." My heart stopped. I literally felt my chest tighten and my hands instantly became clammy. The numbers started spinning in my head like a crazed calculator. 7 months. 7 months. We separated 8 months ago and the last time we were together was... My God. Carolina sat down across from me, accompanied by her sister Monica and a lawyer I didn't know. An elegant guy in an expensive suit who looked at me as if I were a walking wallet. She maintained that victorious smile as she caressed her belly in an almost theatrical way. Every movement of her hand was calculated, as if she wanted to make sure everyone in that room saw what she was bringing to the table. Let me tell you how we got here. Carolina and I got married 8 years ago. She was 23, I was 25. We were that couple everyone envied at the beginning. We met in college, started dating in our final year, graduated together, and 1 year later we got married in a small but beautiful ceremony. The first few years were good, really good. We moved into an apartment we rented together. Then we bought our first house. Well, I bought it. Technically, it's in my name because my job at a construction company gave me better credit terms, but we always considered it ours. Carolina worked in an accounting office. She didn't earn much, but we didn't need much back then either. We were happy with the simple things. Homemade dinners, movies on weekends, modest beach vacations once a year. But, as happens with many couples, the routine started to eat away at us. The last 2 years were difficult. We didn't fight, which is the strange part. We simply stopped connecting. She would come home from work. I would come home from mine. We'd eat dinner watching TV, and each of us would go to bed whenever we felt tired. The weekends became silent. We talked less and less. The topic of children came up several times. I wanted to wait a little longer to get our finances more stable. She would say yes, that we had time. It was never a real point of conflict between us. It just never happened. 8 months ago, after a particularly silent dinner, Carolina told me she needed some time, that she felt lost, that she didn't know if this was what she wanted for the rest of her life. I told her I understood, and I really did. I felt the same way. She moved in with her sister Monica in an apartment on the other side of town. We agreed it was temporary, that we were going to work on ourselves and see if we could fix things. But deep down, I think we both knew it was the beginning of the end. During the first 2 months, we kept in touch. We had lunch once a week, talked on the phone now and then. The conversations were cordial but forced, as if we were two acquaintances trying to maintain a friendship that never really existed. The last time we were together was exactly 7 months ago. We had met for dinner to talk about the divorce papers. We ended up back at the house in our bed trying to remember what we had lost. It was sad and beautiful at the same time, an intimate farewell that neither of us had planned. The next day, she sent me a message saying it was better if we didn't see each other again until the lawyer sorted everything out, that it hurt too much. I replied that I understood and that I would miss her. The next 4 months were a blur of legal papers, division of assets, and calls from lawyers, all civilized. I would keep the house because I had paid for it. She would take her car and the furniture she had bought before we got married. No drama, no fights, an adult and mature divorce. Or so I thought. Now looking at her in that courtroom with that impossible belly, I realized I had been naive. While I thought we were ending things in a civilized manner, she had been planning this. My lawyer, Dr. Ramirez, an older man with 30 years of experience, had told me this hearing was going to be a mere formality, sign papers, divide the little that was left to divide, and each of us would go on with our lives. We had prepared everything. The terms were clear and agreed upon by both parties. But when I saw Carolina walk in like that, I knew something had drastically changed. Her lawyer stood up and addressed the judge. His voice was clear and professional, but every word that came out of his mouth was like a knife in my stomach. Your Honor, my client is 7 months pregnant with Mr. Martinez's child. We are here to request a substantial modification of the original divorce terms. We need to establish immediate prenatal support, prepare the terms of shared custody for when the minor is born, and reconsider the division of real estate. A child needs stability, and the family home would be the most appropriate for his or her development. My world came crashing down. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The lawyer's words bounced in my ears like distorted echoes. Support, custody, family home. Dr. Ramirez looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. It was surprise, disappointment. He was judging me for not having told him about this. The problem was I was just finding out myself at that very moment. The judge, a man in his 60s with a gray mustache and a serious gaze, looked up from his papers and looked directly at Carolina. "Ma'am, I understand you are pregnant. Can you confirm the exact gestational period?" 7 months, Your Honor, she answered with a soft but firm voice, maintaining that slightly victorious smile. "And Mr. Martinez is indeed the father of the child." "Yes, Your Honor." I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and explain that the numbers didn't add up, that something here was terribly wrong. But my lawyer put a hand on my arm and whispered for me to stay calm. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Martinez, do you have anything to declare regarding this matter?" My throat was completely dry. I managed to articulate a few words. "Your Honor, I need time to process this information. I was not aware of Miss Carolina's pregnancy." "I understand. Given the nature of this new information, I am going to suspend the hearing for 1 week. This will give both parties time to prepare adequately and present the necessary medical documentation." 1 week. I had 1 week to figure out what the hell was going on. As we left the courtroom, Carolina walked past me and whispered something that was burned into my memory. "I hope you have a good lawyer. You're going to need one." And she walked away slowly, one hand on her back, as if she had trouble walking due to the weight of that 7-month belly that had appeared out of nowhere in my life. I left that courthouse feeling like I had been run over by a truck. Dr. Ramirez walked me to his car and said something that rang in my head for days. "Look, in 30 years of divorces, I've seen it all, but this smells fishy. The numbers don't add up, and her attitude is too theatrical. We need to investigate." "Investigate what?" I asked, although deep down I already knew the answer. "Everything. The dates, the places she's been, who she's been involved with. If something doesn't add up, we'll find it." That same afternoon, sitting in my kitchen with a beer I had no desire to drink, I took out my phone and started doing the math. I have an app where I mark important dates, and I started reviewing. The last time Carolina and I were together was March the 15th. Today is October the 20th. That's exactly 7 months and 5 days. If she's 7 months pregnant, conception would have been in mid-March. The numbers added up perfectly, too perfectly. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake staring at the ceiling, remembering that last night with Carolina. We had dinner at an Italian restaurant we liked. We talked about the divorce papers, about how we were going to divide things. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it wasn't bitter either. Afterwards, we went home. I don't know how it happened, but we ended up hugging on the couch, both of us crying. And then what had to happen happened, an intimate farewell that neither of us planned, but that we felt we needed. The next day she wrote me that message saying it was better not to see each other anymore, that it hurt too much. At the time, I thought she was referring to the sadness of the divorce. Now, I wondered if there was another reason, and if the baby was really mine. On Friday, I called Dr. Ramirez and told him I wanted to hire a private investigator. He recommended someone trustworthy, an ex-cop named Roberto Silva, who specialized in family cases. Silva was about 50 years old. He was short and stocky with a well-groomed gray beard. He received me in his office on a Monday morning. His walls were filled with diplomas and photographs with police officers, and his desk was impeccably organized. "All right, tell me everything from the beginning. Don't leave anything out, no matter how insignificant it may seem." I told him everything. The marriage, the separation, that last night, the surprise pregnancy. Silva took notes in an old notebook, nodding occasionally. "You suspect the baby isn't yours. The numbers add up too well in her attitude. I don't know how to explain it. She seemed too sure of herself, as if she had everything calculated." "I understand. Look, I'm going to be direct with you. These cases are more common than you think. And usually when a woman shows up with a surprise pregnancy in the middle of a divorce, there's something else behind it. We're going to investigate 3 things. First, who your wife associated with during the separation period. Second, we'll try to get medical information to confirm the exact dates. And third, we'll review her social media activity." "How much time do you need?" "Give me 1 week. If there's something to find, I'll find it." The next few days were torture. I tried to keep myself busy with work, but my mind always went back to the same thing. What if the baby was mine? What if Carolina had really been waiting for the perfect moment to tell me? What if I was the villain in this story, but something inside me said no? Her attitude, her smile, the way she had orchestrated everything, something didn't fit. On Thursday of that week, Silva called me. "We need to meet now." His voice sounded different, more serious, more urgent. I got to his office in 20 minutes. Silva was waiting for me with a thick folder on his desk and an expression that I couldn't tell if it was satisfaction or concern. "Sit down. What I'm about to show you is going to change everything." He opened the folder and took out a series of printed photographs. The first was of Carolina leaving an office building I didn't recognize, but she wasn't alone. A tall, dark-haired man had his arm around her waist. "Do you know this man?" "No, I've never seen him in my life. His name is Alejandro Morales. He works at the same accounting firm as your wife, but in another branch. They've been dating since January, 2 months before our official separation. There's more." Silva moved on to the next photo. It was the same couple, but this time in what looked like a restaurant. Carolina looked happy, relaxed, happier than I had seen her in the last few years of our marriage. This photo is from February the 28th. Look at the date in the bottom corner. There it was printed in small white letters. February the 28th, 2 weeks before our last night together. But wait, it gets better. Silva pulled out more photos. Carolina and this Alejandro entering a hotel, leaving a movie theater, walking hand in hand through a park. "Where did you get these photos?" "Social media. Your wife isn't very careful with her privacy, and this Alejandro even less so. He has everything public on his Facebook and Instagram." "Look at this." He showed me screenshots of Instagram posts. In one dated March the 10th, Carolina and Alejandro were on a beach. She was wearing a swimsuit that showed she was definitely not pregnant at that time. March the 10th, 5 days before our last night, but the real bombshell. Silva took out a sheet with printed text. They were text messages. "How did you get this?" "I have my methods. The important thing is that it's real and legal information. Look at the date on these messages." They were conversations between Carolina and her sister Monica. The date said March the 20th, 5 days after our last night. "Carolina, it's done. I did it." "Monica, do you really think it will work?" "Carolina, the numbers add up perfectly, and if something goes wrong, there's always plan B." "Monica, plan B?" "Carolina, Alejandro knows his part. If things get ugly, he shows up and takes responsibility, but in the meantime, let the idiot pay." I read the messages 3 times before my brain fully processed what I was seeing. Plan B, hail Alejandro. "Look at this." Silva showed me another screenshot, this time of an ultrasound posted on Alejandro's Facebook last month. The description said, "My baby is on the way," with several heart emojis. The ultrasound showed a date 12 weeks of gestation at the time of the post. If that ultrasound was from September, it meant Carolina had gotten pregnant in early June, 2.5 months after our last night. My whole world fell apart and was rebuilt at the same time. The betrayal, the manipulation, but also the relief of knowing I wasn't crazy. The numbers didn't add up because they weren't supposed to add up with me. "There's more, much more." Silva opened another section of the folder, medical records he had obtained legally through contacts in the health system. Dates of gynecological appointments, blood tests, everything pointed to a 5-month pregnancy, not 7. I also found this. He showed me a photo of Carolina at a friend's birthday party dated 3 weeks ago. In the photo, she was clearly pregnant but not 7 months pregnant. Her belly was considerably smaller. So what? She wore something to look more pregnant? Exactly. Probably a fake belly or padding. It's more common than you think. The idea was to come to court, claim the baby was yours, get the support and the house, and then when the premature baby was born, she would have already gotten what she wanted. And if you asked for a paternity test, that's where Plan B came in. Alejandro would disappear from the scene. She would admit she was mistaken, but by then she would have already managed to modify the divorce terms in her favor. And if you sued her for fraud, she would claim emotional distress due to the pregnancy. A perfect strategy, almost. Silva smiled for the first time since the meeting had begun. She made a mistake, a very big one. All this evidence is legal and presentable in court, and I've already contacted Alejandro. You spoke with him? Better than that. He's willing to testify. It turns out Carolina promised him that you would take care of everything until the baby was born, and then he could officially acknowledge him. She told him it was a way to make the rich ex-husband pay for everything. The problem is Alejandro really fell in love. He wants to acknowledge his child now and is tired of all this theater. I couldn't believe it. In 1 week, my world had gone from complete despair to a sense of vindication I didn't know how to handle. What do we do now? Now we prepare for the hearing next Monday, and believe me, your ex-wife won't know what hit her. On Monday morning, I arrived at the courthouse with a folder full of evidence and a mix of nerves and anticipation I had never felt before. Dr. Ramirez had told me to stay calm, to let Carolina dig her own grave before we presented our evidence. The strategy was simple but effective. Let her repeat her story under oath, and then destroy it piece by piece. Carolina arrived 15 minutes late, which surprised me because she had always been punctual. This time she was dressed, completely in white. A white dress that emphasized her belly even more, her hair pulled back innocently, and even a small cross around her neck that I had never seen on her before. The image of the pregnant victim. She sat in her place with a more subtle smile than the previous week, but just as confident. Her sister Monica accompanied her again, and I noticed she avoided looking me directly in the eye. Her lawyer looked nervous. He kept adjusting his tie and reviewing his papers over and over. That gave me a small hope that maybe he knew something wasn't right. The judge entered, and we all stood up. It was the same magistrate from the previous week, and his expression was completely professional. Impossible to know what he was thinking. Good morning. We are here to continue the divorce hearing between Carolina Mendoza and Roberto Martinez with the new circumstances that were presented last week. Miss Mendoza, do you stand by your previous statement? Yes, Your Honor. I am 7 months pregnant with Mr. Martinez's child. The judge took a note and turned to Carolina's lawyer. Do you wish to present any medical documentation to support this claim? Of course, Your Honor. The lawyer approached with a folder and handed several papers to the judge. Here we have the results of the medical consultations and ultrasounds that confirm my client's state of gestation. I waited. Dr. Ramirez had told me this was the crucial moment to let them present all their evidence before showing ours. The judge reviewed the papers for what seemed like hours, but was probably 5 minutes. He frowned occasionally, as if something didn't add up. Miss Mendoza, according to these medical documents your lawyer has presented, there are some inconsistencies in the dates. Some ultrasounds indicate 20 weeks of gestation, others indicate 28 weeks. Can you explain this discrepancy? Carolina turned slightly pale but maintained her composure. Doctors sometimes make mistakes with the dates, Your Honor. The important thing is that I am pregnant and the father is my ex-husband.
And when was the last time you and Mr. Martinez were intimate?
March the 15th, Your Honor. The judge did some quick calculations on a piece of paper. Ma'am, if the last intimate relation was on March the 15th and today is October the 20th, that gives us exactly 7 months and 5 days. For you to be exactly 7 months pregnant, conception would have had to occur around March the 20th. Is this information correct? Yes, Your Honor, Carolina answered without hesitation. But I noticed her hands were trembling slightly. And this is where things got interesting. The judge leaned back in his chair and looked directly at Carolina with an expression I couldn't decipher.
Miss Mendoza, I have here the medical documents you presented, but I also have additional documentation that arrived this morning.
According to these new documents, which appear to be from more recent and detailed medical sources, you are approximately 20 weeks pregnant. Could you confirm exactly how many months pregnant you are? The silence in the room was deafening. I could see Carolina turn completely white. Her lawyer leaned in to whisper something to her, but she brushed him away with a sharp gesture. Your Honor, the doctors. Sometimes there is confusion with the dates. Ma'am, this is a court of law. I am going to ask you one more time and I remind you that you are under oath. How many months pregnant are you exactly? Carolina looked at her sister, then at her lawyer, and finally she looked at me. In her eyes I saw something I had never seen before, real fear. 5 months, Your Honor. The murmur in the room was immediate. Even the people waiting for other cases turned to see what was happening. And who is the father of the child? Carolina broke. She literally collapsed in her chair and began to cry. But this wasn't the performance from the previous week. These were real tears of desperation. Your Honor, I can explain. Ma'am, who is the father of your baby? Alejandro Morales. At that moment, like in a movie, the courtroom door opened and a tall, dark-haired man walked in. It was the same man from the photo Silva had shown me. Excuse me, Your Honor. I am Alejandro Morales. I am here to acknowledge the paternity of my son. The drama couldn't have been more perfect if Hollywood had written it. The judge raised a hand to maintain order in the room. Miss Mendoza, do you acknowledge that you have lied under oath in my court? Carolina couldn't stop crying. Her lawyer stood up. Your Honor, my client is obviously in an altered emotional state due to the pregnancy. I request a recess to. Mr. Lawyer, your client has just admitted to perjury in my court. There is no emotional state that justifies lying about paternity to obtain fraudulent financial benefits. Dr. Ramirez stood up. Your Honor, we have extensive documentation that proves this was a premeditated attempt at fraud. Photographs, text messages, and testimonies that show Miss Mendoza planned this situation to modify the divorce terms in her favor. Present that documentation. The next 20 minutes were a display of poetic justice. Dr. Ramirez presented every photo, every message, every piece of evidence Silva had collected. Carolina didn't look up once. Her lawyer tried to interrupt several times, but the judge silenced him. It was evident that this had gone too far for any legal strategy. When we finished presenting all the evidence, the judge took a few minutes to review everything. Miss Mendoza, in my 25 years as a magistrate, I have rarely seen such an elaborate and calculated attempt at fraud. Not only did you lie under oath about paternity, but you manipulated medical evidence and deliberately planned to deceive this court to obtain financial benefits. The sentence was swift and decisive. The divorce is ratified under the original agreed-upon terms. Mr. Martinez retains ownership of the house. Ms. Mendoza will be responsible for covering all legal costs for both parties. Additionally, she faces charges for perjury, which will be forwarded to the corresponding prosecutor's office. A no-contact order is established between the parties. Carolina left the room crying, supported by her sister. Her lawyer apologized to the judge and practically ran after them. Alejandro approached me before leaving. "Brother, I'm sorry about all this. She had told me you were an abusive guy who had left her with nothing. I didn't know the truth until the investigator contacted me. My son will grow up knowing the truth." I thanked him and he left, a decent guy caught in Carolina's lies. 6 months later, I sold the house and moved to another city. I got a better job and a completely new perspective on life. Carolina had to pay a considerable fine for perjury and do community service. The no-contact order is still in effect. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't investigated. If I had believed her story, I would probably be paying child support for a child that isn't mine, living in an apartment because I would have lost my house, and Carolina would be raising her son with Alejandro using my money. The truth, as painful as it may be, is always better than a comfortable lie. Update for those who asked: Alejandro and Carolina are together raising their son. According to what Silva told me, they got married last month. Apparently, love can blossom even after a fraud conspiracy. And to answer the question I get asked the most, do I miss her? The truth is, I don't. I miss the woman I thought she was, but that woman probably never really existed. Sometimes life gives you a second chance in the most unexpected way. My ex-wife thought her biggest lie was going to destroy me financially. In the end, it was the truth that saved me from a life of deceit. And that, my friends, is how my ex-wife's triumphant smile became my ticket to freedom. This story is not just one person's experience, but a mirror reflecting a highly common reality in our society. The personal details may differ, but the underlying lesson is a shared answer for many similar situations. When relationships break down, the conflict rarely stays only between two individuals. It becomes entangled with expectations about money, loyalty, pride, and the silent pressure of winning after a breakup. In this case, what began as a quiet, almost civilized divorce slowly revealed a darker pattern. One where trust was treated not as something sacred, but as a tool that could be manipulated for personal gain. A carefully staged pregnancy, a courtroom performance, and a plan built around financial advantage show how easily legal systems and emotional histories can be weaponized when honesty disappears. Stories like this are uncomfortable because they challenge a comforting myth many societies repeat, that family conflicts should always be handled quietly, that exposing wrongdoing somehow destroys the family, and that enduring unfair treatment is a form of maturity. Yet what we often call harmony is sometimes just silence covering manipulation. When people exploit sympathy, whether through tears, moral accusations, or dramatic gestures, they rely on the assumption that the other person will stay quiet to avoid appearing cruel. That is how toxic cycles survive for so long. Not because the truth is weak, but because honesty is often socially discouraged. Looking back at what happened here, I cannot help but think about how easily the story could have ended differently. If I had accepted the accusation without questioning it, if I had chosen peace over investigation, the lie might have quietly rewritten my life. A house lost, years of financial responsibility for a child who was never mine, and the lingering belief that I somehow deserved it. Many people carry burdens like that because they are afraid that defending themselves will make them look heartless. But sometimes telling the truth is not cruelty, it is clarity. And that is where the conversation shifts from the courtroom to something much more personal. When I share this story, I am not asking you to judge the characters as heroes or villains. Instead, I am asking you to think about boundaries. Because setting a boundary is rarely comfortable. It forces us to face accusations, misunderstandings, and sometimes even public shame. But refusing to set one can slowly erase your own dignity. When we speak up, when we investigate, when we insist that the facts matter, we are not tearing relationships apart, we are simply refusing to let deception define them. So let me leave you with a question that many people quietly face but rarely discuss openly. If someone you once loved stood in front of everyone with a story that could ruin your life, and the only way to defend yourself was to expose their lies publicly, knowing it might permanently destroy what remained of your shared history, would you stay silent for the sake of peace, or would you reveal the truth and accept whatever consequences followed?